The next days were quiet, long, and tranquil, every sunrise different, every little walk turning up something interesting. There were calls from the kids and calls from friends, but they had their own peaceful little world. They were on one of their sundown beach patrols when Alice thought she saw a shark, a big one, being pushed by the surf headfirst toward the beach. It didn't really seem to be swimming. It looked like it was being washed in, helpless. Walter hesitated, but Alice ran right to the shoreline. The big dorsal fin rolled itself drunkenly over in the surf, gray on one side, white on the other. Only it wasn't a fin. It was a wing, the wing of a stingray. It flapped the surface of the water in a slow roll. This stopped even Alice in her tracks, and she slowed to a walk, moving quietly closer to it as Walter caught up to her. What would have been a big shark was still a good-sized ray, probably 4 feet across the wings. The body itself was quite stout and blunt, like a gray football. Then there was that long tail, like a coachman's whip. Standing at the waterline, Walter and Alice could see that the creature wasn't making any progress at all against the surf. So close now that it sailed in and out with every wave, retreating with the tide, too. It flapped its wings, but in no particular rhythm, and with no strength. The tide was still going out, and that left the stingray farther and farther up the beach with every retreating surge. At last, inevitably, one large swell rolled the animal over and over, its wings flapping across its body like a loose overcoat. When this wave pulled back, the ray was up on the beach and on its back, white belly and white wings up, the small mouth at the front of the football, gasping. Alice and Walter looked at each other and then looked up and down the beach, hoping to see someone who might know about these things, who might be able to help. There was not a soul to be seen. Alice walked cautiously up to the creature. The ocean now barely reached the animal's wings. The ray was clearly beached, and would be for hours until the tide returned. Alice looked at Walter, who was taking this all in. "Walt, he's dying." Walter heard her. He knew from looking at the heaving body of the thing that she was right. "He's stranded, Walt, and he's exhausted. He can't last much longer up here on the sand." Walter knew what she was starting to think. He knew there was no way that Alice would abandon the animal. "You think he's really in danger?" he asked. He didn't think it wasn't, but his question cut through a lot of discussion. "Definitely," said Alice with a firm nod. "What about the tail, the stinger thing?" he asked, almost helplessly. "We'll just have to be careful. We'll just have to see. I think he's too tired to really use it." Before they could do anything, they had to flip the animal over. They each grabbed one wing together, backing up and crossing over the body of the creature. Walter couldn't help but think of all the times he'd been flipped over it in the hospital. This part wasn't all that hard. The football body high-centered the creature, and he rolled over, the wing coming out of their hands and suddenly slapping the sand. They moved to lift up the flap of a wing, but they weren't looking at the whole animal. They were just staring at its tail. The wing that Walter held pulled out of his hands, and they both jumped back, startled. They tried it again. The tail showed how spent the ray was. It moved like a listless garter snake. They tugged at its wings, both of them walking backward toward the sea. The stingray was heavy and seemed heavier still because of the friction of its body against the sand. It was work, and Alice had to balance her efforts out with Walter, who was not able to pull as strongly. They caught a break when a bigger wave sent a thin sheen of water past their feet. They were able to use this bit of water to hydroplane the ray on its belly, gliding it out into the shallow water. The water was cool, almost cold, but bearable. They didn't know what to do next. Walter was quite obviously ready to let go immediately. He held on only because he wouldn't leave Alice with the ray all by herself. Now the animal was wriggling its wings, the tips curling like an enormous tongue. Once they got it to where the water was rushing past their knees, Walter asked, "Now what?" "Believe it or not, this is the first time I've ever done this," Alice shouted. They both laughed. They were so happy at having saved the animal's life. The two of them were staring at that whip, which was now moving more animatedly. "I think we let go on the count of 3, and then both run like crazy," Walter said, still laughing. Alice did the honors. 1, 2, 3. They flung their arms up in unison and yanked their feet out of the ocean, turning back to the shore. As they got a couple of strides away, Walter lifted his legs up and down in an exaggerated style, like a slow-motion drum major, which caused Alice to double up with laughter and grab her knees. Once completely clear of the water, they both flopped down on the sand, hugging and laughing. They looked up finally, wondering if they might still be able to see the stingray. "Look," Alice said, pointing. The animal hadn't gotten very far at all from where they'd released it. It helplessly beat first one wing and then the other, smacking the surface of the sea. But again, the ocean was driving it back to shore. They yelled, "Come on! Come on!" It was no use. They watched the whole prior scene repeat itself. In a matter of minutes, there was the ray again, lying on its back, stranded on the beach. In fact, it was only a few feet farther down from them than it had been the first time. Walter and Alice looked at each other, puzzled, feeling helpless themselves. Still, there was no one else in sight.